Hello, I'm Shazza and this is Hooked on Books, and today, well, first of all, I've been gone a while, but I feel like we're just going to have this unspoken agreement that every now and then I'm probably going to disappear off the face of the planet and then just return again with no explanation. Is that cool? Anyway, the last video I did was my TBR for the O.W.L's Readathon, which is the Harry Potter Readathon, and I thought I would do a wrap up and let you know if I succeeded and what I read and whether or not I kind of stuck to the TBR, etc, etc. So let's get on with it. For the Readathon you got to choose what career you wanted to do, it told you what subjects you needed to study, and each subject represented a certain reading prompt. I decided to be a healer, which meant that I had to do a total of 8 subjects. In other words, read 8 books, which I've pretty much done. So I'm going to talk about the first one, which is herbology. So for herbology, I'm just looking at all the shite here because I can't remember off the top of my head. Pretty certain, okay, for herbology it was to read a book with a plant on the cover, and I chose to read The Faculty of Dreams, which is translated from Swedish, I think. It's translated from Swedish, and this was on the Man Booker International long list this year. And I've had my eye on this author for a while, so I was really quite excited to read this one, and I only really read it because it was on the long list. And out of all the books I read in that list, this is probably my personal favourite that I read. Unfortunately it wasn't shortlisted, but I thought it was fantastic. It was a real sort of experimental novel looking at the character of Valerie Solanas, who wrote the Feminist Manifesto, and she attempted to kill Andy Warhol. And it's really interestingly done because it's almost like you can really sense the author's presence in this book, and it's part of it is her trying to figure out who this character was and creating a story, an imaginary story around her. You've even got these sections in which you've just got this conversation between the narrator and Valerie, and it's kind of going back and forth, and it's very much about figuring out who this woman was. And I found it really fascinating, really interesting structure, and just find it so readable. I really loved this one. The next subject for me to study was Defence Against the Dark Arts, and the prompt for that is Reducto, title that starts with an R. So I only had 2 books on my shelves that started with an R, which is insane. And I ended up going for Ready Player One, and I was so reluctant to read this because I just really didn't feel like it, and I felt like, oh, I'm just forcing myself to read this book. And I'm really glad that I did, because I feel like this is a book that I potentially would have got rid of before I had read it, because I had no real sort of, I didn't feel that drawn to it anymore. And there was a lot of hype when it first came out, and that's probably why I bought it. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, I don't think this is going to be for me. It's just this sort of gaming based thing, and it's got a lot of 80s references, and that's all I knew. And I thought, this isn't going to be for me. And I ended up absolutely loving it. It's probably one of the best books I've read this year, and it was a 5-star read for me. I just felt so enthralled with the story, loved the whole virtual reality elements, all the references to the 80s. You know, I was born after that, but I didn't feel like lost on it. Didn't affect my reading in a negative way if I didn't completely know what they were talking about. I just found it to be a really fun, compelling read, and really interesting to kind of think about the effects, I guess, of technology and virtual reality and the real world, and yeah, just really great fun. I watched the film, thought it was a bit shit. It was interesting looking at my Goodreads friends list to see the ratings that people had given it. Most people sort of gave it 4 or 5 stars, and then there was the odd person in there who'd maybe only give it 1 or 2. So it is well liked. So I don't necessarily feel like I've got loads to add, but I just found this to be a pleasant surprise and just a really fun read. The next subject is potions, and the prompt for that is to read a sequel, and I decided to go for a Terry Pratchett book, and this is Wyrd Sisters, and this is one of the witches stories. I just find Terry Pratchett books to be you know, really fun, sort of, I don't know, they're just very comforting books for me. I just know that I can just sit and read them, and I don't really need to like pay too much attention. It's always really funny, always really sort of fantastical. Well, it is fantasy obviously, but just fun and nothing too overcomplicated, just an enjoyable read, and this one was no different to any of the other ones for me. I just really loved it, and I really like Granny Weatherwax, so she's a character in here that I really get on with, so just another really fun, enjoyable read. The next subject was Transfiguration, which was to read a book with sprayed edges or a red cover, and I cheated on this one and I went for one that has a red spine because I didn't have time to pick up a red book. I was going to, if I had, I was already in the middle of reading this, which is why I was trying to fit it into the Readathon. If I'd had extra time, I might have read another book that had a red cover. But anyway, this counts, and I've spoken about it a couple of times on my channel, but I've now since finished it, and I just find this incredibly readable. It's a huge book, but I just sped through it. It's very sort of, I've said this before as well, that it's quite like a small way to a long way to a small angry planet, in that it's a very character-focused science fiction book. I found it to be a very positive read. I think it has kind of a good moral message. There's good characters in here. You kind of sort of get to know them and see them navigate the world. You sort of see their flaws. So they were really well fleshed out, and it was an interesting story. I guess my main criticisms are, you know, what I really liked about A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is it was more the description of these different species and these different worlds, whereas this is a lot more realist, which was interesting, and I did really enjoy it. And I think she might be writing a sequel. I mean, this is long in the future, but I'm pretty certain that's what she's doing. But yeah, do really recommend this if you haven't read it. It's out in hardback at the minute. I'm not sure when the paperback's due, but I really enjoyed it. The next subject was Charms, which was to read an adult work. I didn't pick a book specifically for this, and I kind of feel like a lot of people that take part in this type of readathon are generally more people that read a lot of YA, so having a prompt like that makes sense, whereas for me, pretty much all I read is adult works. But I did listen to an audiobook of Stephen King's Pet Sematary. I really like listening to kind of like books like that are just, I don't know, they work really well in audiobook for me because they're quite creepy and kind of like draw you in a bit, and it's more sort of telling you a story. It's not about appreciating the language, it's not about appreciating like amazing themes or whatever. For me, it's just an easy thing to listen to. But I don't really take audiobooks in that much, and they're more background noise for me than anything, so I don't really have a huge amount to say on it, but I guess that counts for my charm subject. The next three subjects are subjects that I got to choose myself, so those were all the sort of compulsory subjects. So for my choice subjects, the first one that I chose was History of Magic, and the prompt for that is published at least 10 years ago, and I decided to go for Perfume. And this is translated from German. It's quite a well-known book, but you know, it's definitely a classic, and I love this particular edition. I wanted to get it for ages, and I got it, I think I got it at the beginning of this year. This is just a real sort of gothic story that has a real sort of focus on the senses, obviously particularly smell. I found the story really interesting, the writing was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I really want to watch the film, and there's a TV series that's kind of inspired by it as well, that's on Netflix as well, that I really want to watch as well. I don't think that I read this at the right time, potentially, because I just had a lot going on, and I feel like it's one that I definitely would want to revisit in the future, because I feel like I should have loved it more than I did. I did enjoy it, but I know that I could love this even more if I didn't have as much going on in my life, which is a shame, because this happens to me all the time. I tend to read books and I'm really looking forward to them, and then life happens, and then I keep trying to read, but I'm really distracted. Anyway, it's a really great book anyway from what I did get out of it, but I definitely feel the need for a reread in the future. The next subject I chose was Care of Magical Creatures, and the prompt for that is land animal on the cover, and I ended up choosing one that I didn't mention in my TBR video, and I went for the George Saunders Fox 8, which is a bit of a short story, and it was really fun. It was so sweet and really funny, and it's got these little illustrations throughout it as well. It's basically the story of this fox who's trying to understand humans, and it's written in this sort of incorrect language, so sometimes it can, like, I felt like occasionally I'd maybe stumble over it, but a lot of the time I find that I kind of got into the language, but the language itself just made it really funny. I just found this really, really enjoyable. Kind of just sort of had a really sort of warm feeling, so I did really enjoy it, and I love this little book as well. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful book. The final subject I decided to study was Ancient Ruins, and the prompt for that was to read a retelling, and I decided to go for Dragula by Mam Stoker, but it's actually by Sophie Wilson. I haven't quite finished this yet. I'm probably going to finish it today. This is the the kind of book that I bought but wasn't necessarily planning on reading it. It was just one of those fun things that I kind of just wanted to own. It's basically a retelling of Dracula, obviously, but instead of Dracula you've got Dragula, so it's based on a drag queen. It's basically for anyone that is in any way interested in drag, in that it's a lot of kind of all the kind of catchphrases and stuff. So if you like watch RuPaul's Drag Race, or if you've watched Paris is Burning, or if you go to any drag shows and you've picked up on any of the slang, it's basically saturated in that, and it's fucking hilarious. So I'm having a lot of fun reading it. I'm not going to talk about it in any sort of critical, analytical way. I mean, that might be quite fun to do, but no, it's really just a bit of fun, and I am enjoying it, and I love drag queens, and I'm just finding this really hilarious. So those are all the books that I read for the readathon. I feel like we've got a bit of a sort of red and orange theme going on here, but it was such a fun readathon to take part in, and I'm quite excited already to do it again next year. If you took part, I'd love to know what you read, if you were successful and what career you went for, that sort of thing. If you've read any of these books or are interested in them, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. But for now, that's all, and maybe I'll be back here next week. We'll see. I'm so inconsistent.